Why did I just spend like 60 videos on simple and multiple linear regression in Python? Well, of course, there's a lot of fundamental stuff like linear algebra and even a little bit about statistics and, some Python stuff that we had to talk about like NumPy. But ignoring all of that, the main piece is that just if you isolate linear regression in particular, it is the fundamental building block to understanding almost everything in machine learning. It's just understanding that this is some model that is predicting a continuous value. Okay, we're trying to predict a continuous value and we measure the error on that related to what the actual value was. So we have some prediction and we have some actual value that we received for that, and we think about the difference between that. And that's going to make up the majority of our cost function. Maybe we'll sum over all of these differences or our errors, and then we'll come up with a value. Okay, so we want to minimize this error because we want to find these values of the functions, so the beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, we want to find these parameter values that minimize that cost function because that means we're doing well, right? Okay, so this makes sense. And so a linear model is just one type of model that predicts a continuous value, except we're not always going to want to predict continuous values. That is, someone's age or, the depth of a pool, something like that. We might want other problems like, is this spam or is this not spam? We might want something like, is this a cat or a dog? Is this a cat, a dog, a mouse, or a rabbit? Something like that, okay? So there's a lot more complicated problems, and we talked about these already with classification, and we talked about clustering, which isn't too much related to what we're talking about right now, but it'll come into play eventually. There's other sorts of problems we want to solve with these models, and a continuous or linear regression model is not going to do it. But it is extremely essential to understand everything that we just talked about because it's just about learning these parameter values. And honestly, a lot of the time, we're actually going to be basically making a linear model and then just doing something to it after that gets it into the range that we want. And just to give some intuition, well, maybe we wanted to treat it as a probability. And so we wanted between 0 and 1, 1 being guaranteed that this is true, and 0 meaning I really, really don't think this is true, or it's very unlikely that it's true. Maybe the probability of something being spam, an email being spam, well, we can't really have a value between negative and infinity to say that it doesn't mean much. We want a probability that says, oh, I have a 70% chance, at least I think there's a 70% chance that this email is spam. Okay, so if we do that, well, we're going to need to not toss away our linear model. We're going to need to add to it and then maybe do something like just shove the linear model into a function that produces a value between 0 and 1. And then again, we'll still try to look at the derivatives of whatever cost function makes sense with respect to those parameters, and then we'll try to get the right parameters to minimize that cost function, whatever it is. Okay, we're going to see this pattern all the time, so I really hope that at least that makes sense. And I'll see you in the next part where we start talking about logistic regression. Okay, that's why I was giving some intuition for what's called binary classification, predicting whether something is or is not something. We're ready for this now. I hope you knew all the linear regression stuff. We're going to keep with the gradient descent, and we're not going to talk about that whole what's called the normal equation. It's basically just the formula, as I said, for minimizing or getting the right beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, etc. We're going to use gradient descent because that is a general purpose learning algorithm that'll figure those out regardless of the cost function or whatever the model is. It's going to work. It's going to find the right parameter values for our task, which will essentially let us solve any task. Okay, I'll see you there.